Welcome to the Therapy Show podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Mustard. In each episode, I interview a seasoned and knowledgeable talk therapist from the counseling world to glean valuable insights, techniques, and tools that you can apply to your practice and your life. And if you're considering a career in the counseling field or just want to hear about what it's like to be a talk therapist, then this is the podcast for you. In this week's episode, I'm diving into the complex and often misunderstood topic of gender distress. I have Pamela Garfield-Jaeger, a seasoned social worker from California with over 20 years of experience, who has recently authored the book, A Practical Response to Gender Distress, Tips and Tools for Families. Pamela, also known as the Truthful Therapist, shares her journey from working in the mental health field to becoming a vocal advocate for a more nuanced and careful approach to gender identity issues. Throughout our conversation, Pamela sheds light on the rise of gender distress among young people, the influence of social media, and the potential consequences of affirming care without thorough exploration of underlying issues. She emphasizes the importance of understanding gender distress not just as a diagnosis, but as a symptom of broader psychological dynamics. She also discusses the legal landscape surrounding gender-affirming care for minors. You will gain insight into the content of her new book, which aims to provide practical advice for families navigating the challenges of gender distress. The book stands out for its accessibility, offering straightforward guidance, debunking common misconceptions, and equipping readers with the knowledge to engage in informed discussions with healthcare professionals and family members. So whether you're a parent, a mental health professional, or simply someone interested in the complexities of gender identity in today's society, this episode offers valuable perspectives and resources to understand and support those experiencing gender distress. So join us as we explore the delicate balance between affirming individual identity and ensuring comprehensive care that addresses the full spectrum of an individual's well-being. But before we hear from Pamela, I am super excited to extend a special offer for you. You can now access my collection of guided meditations and hypnosis recordings at absolutely zero cost. That's right, they are absolutely free. These powerful tools are designed to positively influence your mind and body, promoting profound shifts in your perception, emotions, and overall well-being. By harnessing the power of focused attention and deep relaxation, both meditation and hypnosis can transform your mental and physical states. Currently, my library includes sessions on weight management, achieving success, and alleviating anxiety. So to access these resources, simply click the link in the show notes. I'm in the process of expanding my offerings to include topics like fostering healthy relationships, as well as building confidence. So don't miss out. Click the link in the show notes to start your journey today. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of The Therapy Show. I'm your host, Lisa Mustard, and this week's guest is Pamela Garfield-Jaeger. Welcome to the show, Pam. It is so awesome to have you.
Hi, yay. I'm so happy to be here.
Yes, and before we jumped into recording, we were talking about how we are the same Gen X generation. I don't even know if we should bring some things up, but we were talking about her last name being Jaeger, and I got it. I said, oh, Jaeger, like Jägermeister, and she was like, yes, that is it. So we were going down memory lane there for a second. But anyway.
We partied at the same time.
Yes. So we were partying at the same time, but on different sides of the country, I'm guessing. Okay.
At the time, I was living in New York.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I was in Virginia. So, and then somehow you made your way over to California, which I want to hear your story and all that good stuff. But you're also known as the Truthful Therapist. Is that right? Your handle?
That is.
Okay. Okay. So some of y'all might know her, might follow her on Instagram. And some of you, might be your first introduction to Pamela. So could you share with our audience a little bit about, who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So online, I'm known as the Truthful Therapist. But really before that, I was just a social worker from California who worked for over 20 years. And I work with kids, families, group homes, hospitals. I had to drop out of my profession in 2016. I was out for about 4 years. Then I came back in 2021. Things were so radically different. Wow. And I was shocked.
Yeah.
And then the COVID mandates came through, and I chose to not comply with the mandates. So that enabled me to become the Truthful Therapist. And be honest about what I felt was wrong with our profession, which is a lot of ideology and less mental health care.
Yes. Okay. Got it. Makes sense. Because I can't imagine being gone for 4 years and coming back in, and so much has changed. So you worked primarily with like kids or teens, or who were you working with at that time?
Yeah, so at that time, in 2021, I was a per diem at a IOP PHP program, and I was at what they call a float. So I was working both with adults and with teens.
Hmm.
But because I had experience and I was good with the teens, and quite frankly, a lot of people don't like working with teens, they had more openings at that time. I was working more with the teens and I was good at it. So they kept putting me in there. So
I
I worked
gotcha.
more with the teens, but I also worked with adults too.
Yeah.
And even there was a big contrast between the teen program and the adult program in terms of how much social justice culture was there.
Okay. And so then when the COVID vaccine mandates came out, it was just a decision point for you that you weren't gonna do it. Yeah. And I know a lot of people had to make that decision in our field, especially the
Yeah,
people
I mean,
working at hospitals, in like those types of settings.
I had literally just recovered from COVID. I mean, actually, even according to the CDC, I wasn't supposed to get it yet. Like even in their strict guidelines, I forgot what they were saying was the appropriate gap, but it was something like 3 months. I can't remember.
Yeah.
It kept changing.
Right.
But
Right.
I had just recovered from COVID. I was fine. I was actually, despite I have a physical disability, which means I had a repetitive stress injury. So I had like a nerve damage within what my brachial plexus. I'm pointing towards my near my collarbone because my bones were actually crushing my nerves between my collarbone and my first rib.
Oh, wow.
And it was, yeah. So my upper body was a problem, but I was really in good shape because I was running and hiking a lot, which I think helped me really battle COVID quite easily.
Yeah.
And I also got that, horse medicine that they told us not to take.
Right.
So
Right. I gotcha.
I was okay.
Yeah.
And I had just gone through pretty much hell and back physically, like I
Mhm.
just described, with all of my chronic pain. And I still wasn't even fully recovered. I couldn't even work full time. And I just didn't trust it. It was before I really even knew more of the information about how the trials weren't run properly and some of the other things and how it was before everybody just started getting sick because at the time I thought maybe it was even I don't know how safe but I thought it was effective somewhat but it
Mhm.
wasn't so I
Yeah.
didn't even know that stuff. I did see my husband actually got it and I watched him suffer. He's okay now but initially he had a tough time with it. So I just, after going through so much pain, I just didn't want to go through that. So
Sure. Yeah.
I said,
So
no way, Jose.
yeah. So you ended up leaving your job because of that, and then you became the truthful therapist.
Yeah. Then
Wow.
yeah, I was doing this little Instagram page about just sort of my red pillings. And it was anonymous. And then once they canned me, I decided I was going to go public and put my name out there and tell people what my profession is and where I'm coming from. And I thought I had a better voice coming from the mental health perspective, since that's where my experience is. I was realizing that a lot of people who were talking on these issues didn't have that kind of mental health experience, even though they were talking so much about mental health. I was like, but you're not talking about them. You've never actually worked with
Mm.
people who've suffered different mental illness. So I just thought that would be my niche. So I decided to, yes, become the truthful therapist and be public, put my name, put my face. I started to make some reels. I started to talk about the kids that I met that were identifying as non-binary and my colleagues weren't doing or saying anything, but I could tell they were suffering from other issues and it was an avoidance tactic or a way to kind of throw their power as a kid that when they felt really powerless, things like that.
Yeah.
So I was just watching this really obvious dynamic unfold and I started to talk about it.
I gotcha. Okay. And now you've written a book. The book's
Yeah.
coming out. This is your first book? All
It's
right. Okay.
crazy.
Wow.
Crazy
So
stuff. I don't recommend it.
oh, writing a book, a lot. I know. I hear that from a lot of my guests who've written books. They're like, oh, it is a beast, but they're so
Every time I
proud of
think I'm
it when it comes
done,
out.
I'm not.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell us about your book.
Yeah, so because I've been in this space for so long, it's been now like 3 years where I've been really watching the trans agenda unfold And talking to people, I've met a lot of detransitioners. I've met and talked to both professionally and personally a lot of parents who have kids that have been sucked into the trans ideology. And I've been following the news on it. And then I have this rich therapeutic background with teens and families. I felt like it was my turn to write something, to get it out there. I did have a kind of shorter hand version already online in my parents' guide to mental health, which is what I wrote, this website, which has just on a lot of topics. And I wrote this one on gender dysphoria, which is about 20 pages. And I was like, first I was like, I'm just gonna publish that, make it a booklet. And then I started adding more. Then I started adding more. Then I started adding more. And now it's a book that's close to 200 pages.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's how it all started. Just
Yeah. So I didn't think it would be a big deal. And then they're like, wait, I want to put this in. I want to put that in. And so I go over, it's really written for the quote unquote normies, I call it, for the people I think the people who are really the online creatures that have been watching this, that understand the dynamics. They know that therapists are telling this lie. If you rather have a dead daughter or a live son, it's for people that aren't even aware that those things are going on, the emotional manipulation that's happening within these expert situations. So it basically is waking up people that have no idea, and then maybe they have a partial idea, but they don't really know what's behind it, what the data is, or maybe what are some of the professional reasons that's wrong with it, so that they could, kind of talk back to,
mm,
talk back isn't a good way to say it, but respond to professionals that are saying these things, how it's just not appropriate to say that, regardless of the data. Even like the data doesn't exist for one thing, but those on the other side will insist that it does. So if they, you can get into that argument where he's like, well, I have my studies and they have their studies. And if you look at it closely, which no one's going to do when you're having a conversation, you'll see that their data is full of lies. They have very small very small sample sizes, no control groups. They're not really measuring suicidality. They're measuring just like suicidal thoughts. Like there's so many different things they're not measuring, and most of them have been redacted. So I go into all that, but then also the clinical side of it, where it's just not appropriate to say that. Let's just say for a moment that data is true, which it's not, it's a total lie. But even if it's true, how is that therapeutic to tell somebody that their child, tell the child or tell the parent in front of the child that, oh, your kid's going to go kill themselves if they don't get what they want? That's just completely inappropriate. So people don't, when they're stressed out, when they're vulnerable and their family's in crisis, they don't, you're not always able to think of these things. So I talk a lot about, what they're doing to manipulate families. I talk about what about the clownfish? What about intersex?
mm,
Humans aren't fish. It's kind of simple, but like, I say it a
yeah.
little more detail in the book, but there's all these things that they try to bamboozle us with, and the book is to help you recognize that that's what they're doing. They're what they're saying isn't consistent and doesn't make sense, and to be confident.
Mm,
And then really what the book has at the end, or it's towards the middle and the end, the bulk of the book is about helping parents, helping families. I give practical tips, like things you could even ask or do, and what to say, what not to say. And the way I put it is, I actually can't give you a script of what to say. These are just ideas. This is a springboard for you to
right.
think about, and what might be behind it, what might be some of the reactions that will happen, which is probably a lot of resistance. And you can't ask all these questions at once. And you have to know your kid, and it has a lot to do with your relationship. So, understanding this isn't all just about gender, this is about usually the family and underlying issues. So I get
Yeah.
into so many different things. And then also what's sort of special about the book is, because I've befriended a lot of the public detransitioners, they've given me permission to print their artwork in there. So I have some artwork in there of theirs, which is really powerful and a good, it to me, and it's a good way to show how this stuff really harms people in a way that words just can't do.
Yeah.
So, you can say this blue in the face, like, oh, let's stop sterilizing kids. This is bad. But like, someone believes in that, it just doesn't really go anywhere. But if you can hit the emotions, with real life drawings and with feelings behind them, then it's more effective.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So that's all in there. And then, yeah, it's got a huge comprehensive list of websites, books, reading materials for adults, for children, movies, TV shows, YouTube videos, just a million references. So it's like if you have this book, you can go down the rabbit hole like forever with it, if you choose. So it's a place for people to know where to go to get this alternate information because we're bombarded with this affirmative model.
Yeah. Okay. That is such a great overview. And I can't wait to read your book. Like I'm so interested in learning more. Um, and I think that it's like, there's so much that we hear about this topic for the person out there who's just like, it's almost confusing. Like, where do you even start? And I think that a lot of this wouldn't come up if you didn't have a child that was, dealing with this big question. So it sounds like you also consult with families too, right? When they come to you and they say this is so. I don't know if you can do this, but can you kind of give us an example or a summary of what a family looks like that is going through this and what this presenting, I guess, in the family?
Yeah, there are so many different types, I guess, or
Yeah.
don't so many different scenarios. So it's really hard to summarize that. And I think different people that you'll talk to that are in this space kind of attract different types. So a lot of the parents that talk to me, they're from California because they know I've been living in California, and they're usually it's a situation where for one reason or another, the kid was left to their own devices and got online and maybe was indoctrinated at school or by their friends and had some vulnerability of some type or another. Maybe they have autistic traits, or maybe there were some issues at home or a family crisis, or something. So it's like basically the theme is there's some kind of vulnerability, whatever that is. And part of my book is I actually list, like, I don't know how many, but at least like 20 different scenarios of like why someone would do this and what are the different types there are, I guess. A lot of it is more deep with like attachment issues and sexual trauma. I think those are the people that really persist with the like gender dysphoria. Those especially have like really early childhood attachment issues. So kids in foster care, which I don't talk to very much, but I know that foster kids are really falling into this, and it's because of their trauma and their attachment issues and their needing this sense of belonging. So there's people like that. And then there's the more affluent families where the two parents are working. They went through something during the lockdowns. The kid was on their computers and their devices, and that's when they decided that they were trans because they saw a lot of things online and they were isolated, and they maybe already were having struggles socially for one reason or another. And then they ended up with this. So it really depends. Usually what I'm doing is I'm looking into like what happened during that time.
Mhm.
I met a family where when the girl decided she was trans, it was right around the time that there was a big storm and a tree fell on their house and they were displaced and she lost all of her things. And it seems like that was the connection because she had this kind of this, I don't know if you call it trauma, but she had something that really affected her. She was displaced, and then she became trans right around then. That's when she started to talk about it and think about it. So it really just depends on the situation and the family.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like any family that comes to therapy, it's like
exactly.
you,
Very
the,
individual.
right. And so the presenting problem usually isn't the presenting problem, right? It's like the problem isn't the problem. Did you play this game in grad school? Like the problem isn't the problem. The problem is, the family of origin, whatever, or it's the,
That's exactly it. And
yeah,
that is the point of the book, is to recognize it. This is it's a presenting problem. It's not the problem. So the whole
right.
idea is to look at whatever the underlying issues are.
Right. And so, and I know it kind of baffles my mind that when I see these, because I'm in a lot of Facebook groups. I don't know if you are, but man, Facebook, whew, and
I
all these
I've
therapist groups.
I've slowed down on that, but
Yeah.
yeah.
But you go into a lot of these Facebook groups and you're seeing things like become a gender affirming therapist and one after like write a letter for gender affirming care or
Yeah.
whatever. And I'm like, how do you do that in a session where it takes like how many sessions to be able to diagnose somebody to begin with? And then not to even mention like I heard this on Stephanie Wynn's podcast the other day and it stuck with me. Like, we're not even supposed to write an ESA letter, right?
Yeah.
Like, we can't even write an emotional support letter because we can't guarantee that the dog or the parrot or the pig or whatever is gonna, we can't guarantee that behavior, right? And so liability, we open ourselves up. So anyway, I guess that's where I don't get it. I don't understand how they expect therapists to just be like affirming, because if we're doing our job and people come up and they're in pain and they need to figure something out, it's like we are here to help people, you know, understand what's going on in their lives. And if somebody comes to me with an eating disorder or an addiction, it's not like I'm just gonna, okay, yeah, let's move you on. Yeah, let's
Yeah.
like something's going on in your life where, there's an issue, it's showing up as a symptom. So I,
It's the
that's what I
same.
don't understand.
I
That's
see
what
it
I
the
don't
same
understand.
way.
Okay.
Yeah, I see it the same way. It's a presenting problem. And I mean, I have like a family therapy background, so I look at it as the trans person as sort of like the identified patient.
Right.
And oftentimes it's about the family system.
Yeah.
So for example, if a mom has cancer and then the girl is identifies as trans because she's suffering from, the fears of her mom, or
Right.
maybe not getting her needs met, or if there's issues within the siblings, like one example, a type, I guess you'd say, in the families is when one sibling gets a lot more attention than the other, either because there's a special needs kid,
Right.
or sometimes it's the opposite, where the other sibling is kind of like a rock star, like a star athlete or something, and then the other sibling who decides to be trans felt invisible. So then it's about the parents realizing that they've been maybe neglecting the emotional needs of that one child, and then addressing that.
Right.
So yeah, it's so complex and it's so individualized. Yeah, to think that they're like just sending letters out. And yeah, I actually did last year. I attended the CAMPT, California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists conference, and they had a letter writing uh, seminar there, which I didn't attend. There was one online.
Hmm.
But yeah, they had that. They're totally condoning that.
Yeah.
And yeah, to act like there's not even any chance that there's an underlying issue is wild. That there's just any sense of logic just goes out the window with this. So that's what I mean
Yeah.
by autologically captured. There's just this blind spot.
I want to share with you a fabulous offer from Therapy Notes. Have you ever felt swamped by endless paperwork and tangled schedules? Then step into a world of clarity with Therapy Notes. Hailed as the gold standard in electronic health records, Therapy Notes is your beacon in the dynamic realm of mental health care. With their round the clock 7-day live phone support, it's evident why they shine with a dazzling 4.9 out of 5 stars on trustpilot.com and Google. From effortless billing to streamlined scheduling, precise note taking, and state of the art telehealth, Therapy Notes is your all in one solution. And for the prescribers out there, they're ecstatic to introduce ePrescribe. And if you're switching lanes from another EHR, they've got your back. They will seamlessly migrate your demographic data at zero cost, ensuring you hit the ground running. So become part of the 100,000 plus mental health professionals community who've chosen Therapy Notes. And to embark on a 2-month complimentary journey, just tap the link in the show notes or use promo code Lisa at checkout at therapynotes.com. That's promo code Lisa, Lisa, at checkout at therapynotes.com. So dive into the Therapy Notes experience today and see why it's the talk of the town. Navigate with confidence and choose the best. Yeah, it's wild. It's like this is a presenting issue. It is a symptom of a bigger problem. I don't know. I just
Seems obvious, right? Yeah.
yeah, right. If you're good there, like if you took 1 year of grad school in any type of program, it would be obvious. Like it's a presenting problem, presenting
Yeah, I
issue of a
guess
bigger
grad
problem.
school from the past, I don't trust it. The
Yeah.
grad schools are so bad. They're just so all about social justice and victim mentality. And I mean, I think it's all wrapped up. Like this idea of becoming trans to kind of hold on to this oppression status for kids too is important to them. And then instead of the therapist saying, "Oh no, like we need you to I want to empower you as a person and I want you to be the best you can," they say you either need to check your white privilege, or you need to deal with your systemic oppression that you're dealing with because of whatever group that you're in or
Yeah.
decided to be in, which is such a weird way, even I'd say I believed a little bit into identity politics. I never brought that into the therapy space. In that context, with someone with suffering, I would never say like, well, it's some system's fault and there's nothing you could do about it because you're oppressed. It's very strange that a therapist would say that. How is that therapeutic, even if it were true?
Right.
So,
Right. I know. And I guess that's my confusion is I don't recognize I just don't recognize it right now in some of these programs and some of the new graduates that are posting in these groups, the questions that they're asking about how do I work with somebody who has different values and beliefs with me when I feel like I could never work with somebody who believes X, Y, and Z. It's like, really? That's what we're here for. Like we're not here
that's the
to
whole point.
impose our values and beliefs on other people. We're here to meet people where they're at and ask them how they want to change what they want their lives to, how they want them to be different, or they want to, get move through whatever suffering they're going through. It's not, we're not here to impose our own, you know, values and beliefs on people. That just blows my mind. I feel like my clinical supervisors I imagine they're only shaking their heads and wondering like, how did we get here? But yeah, it seems to be very in vogue to do that.
Yeah, I actually just took a Zoom training on Friday. I like to, it was free and I like to do this so I can be up to date with what they're doing, with
Mhm.
what they're saying so I can be aware. And it was one interesting piece. I tweeted about it last week when I took the training that it was a trans person running the training who is WPATH trained,
Mm.
the World Association of Transgender Health. Did I get that right? I don't know if I got the acronym
Yeah.
right. World Professional Association of Transgender Health. I think that's what it is.
Mhm.
That he said that use that same phrase you just used, meet them where they're at. But there was this weird way of using it just to manipulate them because the instructor was saying, especially about, well, they used the term BIPOC, which, and I think they were just referring to Black families, are the most problematic or most difficult to work with because they don't buy into the non-binary gender as a spectrum mentality. And the instructors has just went on a lecture with all these fake statistics about how dangerous that belief is. So you have to meet them where they're at and then convince them that their kid is going to die if they don't believe in this gender spectrum. The gender journey was the term they used for their child, and affirm their child. So they're quote unquote meeting them where they at, but they're actually manipulating them to go along with harmful interventions for their child and their families that they don't believe in.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's how they make sense of it in their minds.
That's so crazy. It's
I
so
know.
crazy. Like I can't even follow that line of it's not
You
logic,
can't.
it's
You can't.
manipulation. I mean, it's
It's
like
what it is.
manipulation. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I mean, the way I tweeted, I was like, they hate Black people because the
Mhm.
Black people don't believe in this, and that's their barrier. They have more traditional values, and he
Mhm.
literally, or the instructor literally said that the Black families view this as a white problem. And so it's the job of the therapist to help them recognize this isn't just a white problem. This is reality that your kid is inherently transgender and you need to affirm them or they'll die,
Hmm. Okay. I don't
right?
even know
But you
what
got to meet them where they're at.
right, right. Well, but
And use motivational interviewing style.
is that what the person
Type,
said?
they use that term. Yeah, I was like, wow.
So now we're going to use motivational interviewing as manipulation.
Exactly. And for those that don't know what that is, probably your audience all knows what that is, but that's used for people who are doing really dangerous behaviors like substance abuse or like eating disorder type things where it's really dangerous where they really will die if they carry that out, right?
Right.
Um, and they're trying to equate it to changing someone's behavior, the parent's behavior to affirm their child because the belief is so ingrained that if the kid doesn't get this affirmation that they will die.
Wow. And yet the flip side of that is that from what I understand, and like you said, the research isn't there because how do you do this research? But so many of these people on the other side of the trans surgery are now regretting it so much. And they're saying that my depression is still there, my suicidality is still there. Like nothing has changed except I don't have certain body parts and I'm now full of these chemicals that I have to take for the rest of my life,
Exactly.
which
And I,
I don't understand. I feel so badly for these people.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of them have come around and they really have used their stories for
Mhm.
triumph. So there is a lot of I don't know if you know this, the detransitioners have this, they've kind of appropriated the lizard as their symbol. And
Okay.
do you know that? And
I
do you know
may
why?
no, tell us.
Yeah, it's kind of cool because
Uh-huh.
the lizard represents regrowth
Okay.
because you know how lizards will lose their
Yeah.
tail and they
Hmm.
can grow it back.
Hmm.
Um, I guess technically people can't grow back body parts, but I think that the detransitioners see themselves as people that have come back to themselves and um, go through like a regrowth, and
Yeah.
so that's why the lizard is their symbol. So
Okay.
yeah, you I mean obviously they went through a lot of suffering, but I guess I just wanted to put out there it's not all bad, I guess.
Sure.
Um, but it's not definitely not something you would choose to do, and it's not
Right.
ideal.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. And yeah, they're basically in some cases sterilizing people before they can even make that decision as an adult. Yeah, a lot of them regret the surgeries, especially, the double mastectomy, or they call it a top surgery. Um, there's a detransitioner, her name is Daisy, who's just had her second baby, which is really nice. But she has publicly talked about the regret and the struggle she has for not being able to breastfeed her children, especially the second one. She posted a picture of herself like crying, and she's like, "These aren't happy tears. This is
Hmm.
pain and grief because those doctors convinced me that this is what I needed to do." And she completely regrets it. So yeah, and when I asked the instructor in the training, well, what about detransitioners? Yeah, it was completely minimized. It's very rare. And even when it happens, it's just because they were just one of the unlucky ones that had a complication. But people don't have complications because everything's all safe and effective. So,
Hmm.
no big deal. Yeah, and they completely minimize it. So they have shifted though, because it used to be they didn't want to acknowledge detransition existed. But now that detransitioners have gone public enough, they can't deny that they exist. So now they just say they're really rare and they don't really count. And some of them even want to go back to being trans, which that does happen, but it's usually because people are trying to figure themselves out and they're struggling.
Sure. Sure. And so the detransitioners that you've spoken with or you have do they look back on what was happening in their lives at that point in time when, they were needing some support or needing therapy and like was there something that happened in their family like if you, looking at it from a family therapy perspective what was going on for them? I don't know, you probably can't say exactly what it was, but is it what you shared earlier like
Yeah, I mean, and every single one of them will have their own story about how they had some other mental health issue or a combination of things, like whether it
mhm,
be trauma, abuse from their own parents, substance abuse, being pretty autistic on like high on the autistic scale. They all say that, like, why and how did the doctors overlook this? I clearly had other things going on. I was not in the sound mind to be able to make these kind of decisions about myself. A lot of them were young adults, like 18, 19 years old, but they were really struggling with something.
mhm,
And they there was no gatekeeping. In fact, one of them, like Abel Garcia, he said this in a few documentaries that he's been in, and he said when he talked to his therapist about, his being trans, that the therapist just said, I don't want to gatekeep you. Like actually use that word. I don't want
mm,
to gatekeep you, and signed off on he didn't end up getting all the surgeries, but he got hormones and surgery approval like instantly because the therapist believes so strongly in not gatekeeping.
okay, wow,
Crazy.
wow, I mean, I
Yeah,
don't
once
know,
you learn more about it, you're like, oh my God.
yeah,
Once you go down the rabbit hole. I mean, I personally, just my own sort of perception of it all, I didn't realize how harmful the hormones and the surgeries really were. I thought for some people it was okay. And now I've really learned that even if someone maybe decides to spend their whole life living as a trans person, they will suffer physically and
yeah.
emotionally too, but definitely physically. They will suffer with something. It's just a matter of what and how and when.
Do you know the percentage of people that present with this issue, like true gender dysphoria?
I mean, I don't know. These numbers are in like they change by the millisecond. I
Yeah.
mean, in the past they used to say 0.01%, I
Yeah.
think, but
Hmm.
I don't know what it is. I know it always used to be very rare. The other big shift is it used to be grown men who really had that more pervasive thought and belief, and now it's shifted to young women, teenage girls
Yeah.
basically. And that shift happened, I think, around 2017, 18 is when that shift really started. And that's, of course, when they started to market it and, the social contagion started to happen.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The whole social media and that doesn't help our
Hmm.
kids. I mean, I'm convinced. And you're familiar with, I guess, Jonathan Haidt's, all his after about like all that. Yeah. Okay.
I
That's,
am.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I like him.
Yeah.
He really attributes like all of mental health issues in youth on social media. I don't know if I fully agree with him on that. I think that it's a lot, it's
Yep.
definitely a large chunk of it, but I think there are other variables. I don't
Sure.
think he addresses all of that. But yeah, I think he's done great work. And I love that book, The Coddling of the American
Yeah.
Mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Was there anything else that we should know about your book coming out, or anything you want to share with the audience?
I mean, I don't know. Yeah, it's just if especially if you're sort of just getting to know this, my book, there are other books in that are good on this too. Miriam Grossman has one. There are a few others, but mine doesn't get into the history. It doesn't get into, it's not heavily clinical, so it's not bogged down by that stuff. So if you want more, I guess, simple, easy read, basic things, especially if you're kind of overwhelmed with what's going on in your family, my book is your book.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah.
That's I think that's what sets it apart. Laura Becker, she's a detransitioner, and she actually did a review on it, and she said what she really liked about it was that I just I don't beat around the bush. I think were her words. I don't beat around the bush. You
Yeah.
know what you're gonna get, and it's really easy to read, and you get all the information you need, and it has a ton of resources.
So it sounds like it's real practical
Yeah.
advice and information on what if this is showing up in your family, what do I do? Well, read your book.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah, exactly. Because yeah, there's a lot about the history. There's a lot about queer theory out there. There's actually another book coming out specifically on that, like all the queer activists and how this came about. I touch on it, but I really don't get into that in detail. All that stuff is really important information, but this is for someone who's like kind of in the midst of crisis or is just really worried about their family getting sucked into it. Because I also have preventative things like how to fight the pronouns and why pronouns are harmful for kids. So it's just really practical. And maybe if you have someone in your family that you wanted to have this conversation with, and you already know this is wrong, but you don't have all the information, all the talking points, like this is just a way to kind of help you have that ability to have a conversation with somebody about the
Okay.
topic. And it really has this like that compassionate side to it too. It's really
Yeah.
I'm not anti-trans, like this isn't about it. I'm
Right.
pro-human. I'm just
Right.
This is about protecting vulnerable people.
Right. Right. Yes. And the name of the book it's Gender Distress, is that right?
Yeah, it's a practical response to gender distress.
Okay.
And I used to be, it was gender dysphoria in the title originally, but I changed it to gender distress, because you don't have to have the diagnosis of gender dysphoria to need this stuff. So, and pretty much you can say nowadays, especially with the internet, a lot of kids are having gender distress without really having, falling into trans, because there's so many different
Hmm.
stereotypes and pressures on them, right? So it's just a practical guide on how to fight, all of the indoctrination, how to speak to the experts in a way so they don't intimidate you and they don't manipulate you, and then how to talk to your family members and how to look at yourself and how to empower yourself, and then lots of resources so that you can learn more about it, go further into it.
Awesome. Okay. Well, we'll put all the links to buy the book in the show notes, and then also a link for people to connect with you if they want consultation. Is that
Yeah,
something you
so
still do?
my
Okay.
website,
Mhm.
truthfultherapist.org.
Okay. Got it.
And the book will be out March 12th, which is also Detrans Awareness Day.
Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
so there'll be a lot of programs online, and I think in person too. They're having some rallies and things for detransitioners, for them to tell their stories and express themselves with art and writing and speeches.
Okay.
And so I decided to release it on that day as a
Ah,
Yeah.
That's so nice. Okay. Well, like I said, all the links will be in the show notes. And then what's next for you after you get the book and you sell hundreds of millions of them? What's
Yeah,
next?
after I become a bestseller. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Well, the thing I really want to get into, I'm already involved in one situation, and the thing I really want to get into is helping more with these legal cases around the subject. So being an expert witness is
Oh,
actually
okay.
something I'm hoping to get into more of. So if anyone's listening and has connections to that, I already have connected with some legal firms. So I think that's something on the horizon to be, an expert witness.
Cool.
And yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm continuing to do my consultations and writing. I'm probably gonna I've written this parent's guide to mental health, which is on my website, but it's kind of cumbersome on a website. And I've also figured out that people don't want to pay anything that's online, but they'll pay for things that are published. So I think my next book is gonna be publishing what I've already written in my website, which is basically about like all kinds of subjects on how to screen for a good therapist, and how to look for someone that doesn't have skills, and what is appropriate, what isn't, generally speaking, what are different types of therapy, like what's the difference between a skill-based therapy and exploratory therapy, right? Like
Hmm.
things like that. I think there are kind of common knowledge to therapists, but I realize that people who are looking for it don't
Yeah.
understand, so that you
Yeah.
can know what to ask for and know how to be involved. So
Mhm.
if you're a parent, that so you don't get shut out of mental health treatment. So all that's online right now, but I've had some customers, but I think it will do better if I print it. So I think I'm going to clean that up and get that printed out. So that might be my next project.
Okay. Well, I wish you the best with all that. You've got a lot of really interesting things going on, and I have a feeling that expert witnessing you're going to be quite busy in the future with because, I'm seeing a lot of people are pushing back and are, wanting to fight this legally. So I find we're at a really interesting time. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's
in
weird, right?
history. Yeah. Whew.
I'm actually 2 days I'm headed to Kansas for a hearing to support a bill that bans gender affirming care for kids.
Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
Well, safe travels, and you're doing some incredible work and protecting so many people and raising the voices of so many that need to be heard. So thank you so much for coming on to the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Please note that the therapy show with Lisa Mustard is for informational and entertainment purposes only and not a substitute for professional medical or mental health advice. Always consult with your therapist, doctor, or physician before implementing any suggestions from the show. The Therapy Show with Lisa Mustard is edited and engineered by Chelsea Weaver. If you're looking to start a podcast or ready to take the editing off of your plate, be sure to visit chelseaweaverpodcasting.com. Well, that wraps up another episode of The Therapy Show with Lisa Mustard. I know there are hundreds of thousands of podcasts out there, and I'm thankful you've chosen to listen to mine.
Be sure to visit lisamustard.com to access the show notes and discover more fantastic content.
And I'd be grateful if you subscribe to the show. Thank you.